Right. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee of Wokingham Borough Council on the 13th of March. I'm Councillor David Cornish and I will chair the meeting. The Planning Committee consists of 9 elected borough councillors supported by a variety of professional officers. This is not a political meeting, but a quasi-judicial committee which forms part of the planning process. As such, it has formal set procedures which must be adhered to. Firstly, the planning officer will present the application, and then only those speakers who have registered to speak will be invited to address the committee. There is a strict time limit of 3 minutes per category of speaker, those categories being town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and those borough members affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you say rather than by how long you speak for, but above all, please do stay within your time limits. Everyone has had the opportunity to comment on each application through the consultation process, and no one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions or in any way disrupt the meeting. Following the speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate each application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to reach a decision. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with the recommended by the presenting case officer. It is important to understand that the committee can only determine the actual planning applications presented before it, using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the relevant planning inspectorate. We cannot consider whether or not they are a good idea, whether they are needed, whether they are too costly, whether there are alternative uses of the site or more suitable uses of land elsewhere, or whether or not they are popular with residents. I'm afraid that none of those things can count on influencing our decision. Finally, this is a hybrid meeting with committee members present in the room and some officers attending in person and others connecting via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. Can I ask, if you are joining us remotely, please ensure that your camera is switched on only when you are speaking and that your microphone is unmuted only when you are speaking. Thank you. So, are there any apologies for absence this evening? Meetings are all here. Committee members, you've had copies of the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have any comments, requests or amendments? In which case, could somebody propose that we accept them? Andrew, thank you. Someone to second? Michelle, you all in favour? Thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting are recorded and accepted. Do we have any declarations of interest? Then I must recall one myself. I have to declare a prejudicial interest in agenda item 76, which is application 223528, and I declare that interest because of my role with Finchhampstead Parish Council and in producing the Finchhampstead Neighbourhood Development Plan, which makes reference to this location. So for that item, when we get to that on the agenda, I will withdraw from the room. Councillor Mickleborough will take over chairing that item and see it through to its conclusion, at which point I will come back, if someone reminds me. Right, are there any applications to be deferred or withdrawn? Nope, thank you. In which case we'll start with agenda item 74, application 232995, down to the south of Cutbush Lane. And the case officer is Christopher Howard. Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to everybody. Just to note, unlike normal presentations, tonight I will be presenting items 74 and 75 alongside each other. This is because they're fairly codependent, so we will see both applications, the background to the applications at the beginning, and then we'll separate these out to look at the actual specifics of those, and then we will look at the recommendations in turn at the end. In terms of the detail, application reference 232995 was submitted by the University of Reading for a new spine road, which would effectively extend Cutbush Lane East. This includes associated infrastructure, landscaping and drainage attenuation. The road will serve a new 25,000 square metre purpose-built facility for the Natural History Museum, application reference 232833. And this is made on behalf of the Natural History Museum for a 4-storey building to house the collection and provide office space for associated digitisation together with space for research. This includes landscaping, car parking and associated infrastructure. In terms of context, the Natural History Museum houses one of the largest collections of samples in the world with some 80 million specimens. The collection is currently stored largely in London, but the existing facilities were not built for purposes to safeguard and preserve the collection for the future. In addition, the new site would house space for research and digitisation of samples, which would allow for a greater global sharing of the collection. Roughly a third of the collection will be housed in a new facility. The research activities of the Natural History Museum are globally recognised and the building will continue to support this, together with encouraging collaboration with the University of Reading and other partners. Collectively, they have the potential to play a crucial role in climate change research and biodiversity loss. Further benefits associated with the delivery of the Natural History Museum and Spine Road are outlined in both committee reports, together with the drawbacks of those. The Spine Road will enable the delivery of the Natural History Museum to be built in this location with a landscape-led approach applied to its design, and that we will come on to shortly in terms of the Spine Road itself. Now, looking at the context of the area, this which is cross-cutting for both applications, the sites are both located to the east of Shinfield, within the Loddon Valley landscape character area. The Spine Road is subject to application 232995 and is broadly shown outlined in red. This would connect to the proposed broad footprint of the Natural History Museum, application 232833, to Cutbush Lane East and the wider transport network. The Natural History Museum building will be set between two copses, St John's and New Covert, both of which are established landscaping features. Upward Farm is located to the north of the application sites, and both sites are closely related to the British Museum archive. The Spine Road will facilitate further access point for the British Museum. The site selection process for Natural History Museum has been influenced by the ability to cluster with the British Museum and the University of Reading. The site is also located close to Thames Valley Science Park and Shinfield Studios. For access the Spine Road and Natural History Museum collection, both sites will connect onto Eastern Relief Road via Cutbush Lane and South Avenue. The new link would intersect with Cutbush Lane East to the north and the British Museum archive, which would cross existing fields to connect to the new facility, which is highlighted in yellow. Now coming on to the specifics, the details of each application. I will struggle with that word, committee. The next two slides are for the Spine Road application reference 232995. And I'll follow on with the main facility. I've added a cover slide just to provide a distinction for each application. The recommendation for each application will be set out following the presentations for both applications. This slide shows the road outlined in red and its alignment to the Natural History Museum over to Cutbush Lane East. The geometry of the road has been informed broadly by LTM 120 principles. The footway and cycleway on the northern side of the road would be 4 metres in width, which includes a landscaping strip. This element ends just to the east of the British Museum, which is acceptable for the level of use and level of use that would be safeguarded, but would be linked to the Natural History Museum. Land, however, would be safeguarded through the Section 106 agreement to continue the pedestrian cycle facilities should it be required in future years. On the southern side of the road, similar principles are incorporated to inform geometry. A shared footpath cycleway of 3 metres is proposed here, together with a 3 metre landscaping strip. A secondary road leading from the three-armed roundabout serves the Natural History Museum site. There would also be a farm access to the turning head. The main road incorporates a landscape-led approach to the delivery of soft landscaping, which includes suds, ponds and street trees. Looking at a cross-section of the route now, this shows the geometry of a road and a part of the road and how the SUD strategy would provide a soft interlinked network of SUDs basins on the southern side of the road. This helps soften the impact of the highway infrastructure and provides focal points. In addition, these areas will provide habitats for landscape and biodiversity. The applicant has agreed to deliver above policy threshold of 20% biodiversity net gain, and the left-hand side of the slide shows how land will be safeguarded through a Section 106 agreement should it be required in future years. The carriageway for the main element is 7.3 metres, which is significant enough to allow 2 HGVs to pass. As mentioned, we'll come to the opposite recommendation for the spine road following presentation for the main building and given the connections. I will now present application 23833, which is for the Natural History Museum. This is a site plan of proposed facility. The building would be mostly 4 stories in height, as shown in blue, although parts of this would be single story, as shown in purple. The building would be located between the 2 copses, which helps soften this and offers partial screening to the wider landscape. This slide shows a proposed landscape strategy for the site. Similar to the spine road, a suds pond is located in the front, which connects to the suds chain on the southern side of the road. This will also be open for community use and contains a wet pond which retains water level, which should encourage wildlife. The main entrance of the facility is located off a secondary access. This links to a parking court, and in total there'll be 77 parking spaces provided for the complex. Cycle parking is also provided with 34 spaces. Parking connects onto a secondary exit route, which allows for one-way circulation for the service area, which is located to the rear of the building. Beyond the service area, a landscape area is shown, and this will create a buffer for the building to help soften the building. And in addition, it will have seating areas which will allow the Natural History Museum to allow for community use for the wider population of this space. Appropriate landscape buffers are provided between the 2 copses. The floor plans and elevations have been circulated with the agenda, so I'm not going to present these in any detail, but this is a useful image of how the internal space would generally be used. The collections will be stored in a controlled environment in the light blue areas. The grey shows a circulation space, and the labs are shown in red. The office space would wrap around the building on the western elevation overlooking St John's Copse. The building would house 115 full-time equivalent job roles. Finishing off with a few perspective CGIs. Here is a view of the facility from the main spine road towards the front of the building. A suds pond is space which will attract wildlife at the front of the site for the wider community, and there is a decked area here which encourages safe interaction for users of the space. This slide overlooks the main entrance and gives a good impression of the landscaping strategy. Trees are proposed to be planted in the main car park towards the western boundary. Glazing for the reception area helps to provide a sense of natural surveillance to the parking area and the main spine road. A condition is recommended to incorporate a motif or impression for the front outcrop of the front of the building to provide more detail. And that's above the reception area. Here is the main entrance of the facility from the front car park. Sustainability will be at the forefront of the building design. The building has been designed to be net zero ready and will deliver 22% of energy needs from renewable sources. In common with the spine road, the applicant has agreed to provide above policy requirements for biodiversity net gain of 20%. This is an image of the western elevation showing the glazed office section, which will provide surveillance to the main spine road. The landscape officer has requested more detail for the landscape strategy, which will be secured by condition. Whilst there is acknowledged there will be impact on the countryside and landscape, and in particular from the Cutbush Lane M4 overbridge, for the reasons set out in reports, the benefits of the proposed use are considered to significantly outweigh any harm. Moving on to the recommendation, this recommendation is solely for the spine road, being application 232995, and that's item 74. That being the route as shown by the site plan on this slide for the road. It should be noted that a site visit was conducted with members for the application in February. Whilst the spine road is located in this countryside, it will have a visual impact on the landscape. For the reasons set in the report, it will be considered that the benefits of the road and to enable the delivery of the Natural History Museum are significant. This and the other factors, as discussed within the report, outweigh any harm. The application can be recommended for approval, subject to conditions in Section 106 agreement. Alternative recommendation C is put forward to refuse application should a Section 106 agreement not be secured within 6 months of the committee resolution unless a longer date is agreed. Members are to note condition 3, which means the road cannot be delivered independently from the Natural History Museum collection. And just on the supplementary agenda, there were a couple of bits of just a few amendments to some of the conditions which are being cited there. I shall hand back to the chair now so this item can be reviewed by the members.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Just for the benefit of a quite large audience this evening, just to recap, there are two applications we're discussing here. We'll take them one at a time, but there's a clear linkage between the access road and the building, which is why Christopher's presented them in the way that he has. But the first application to comment upon will be 232995, which is the road. And we have two speakers. The first I call forward is Dave Green, local resident, who I think is speaking objection. Dave, welcome and thank you. Just to remind you, you do have 3 minutes and we will be adhering to that. You push that on and away you go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. The site is designated within the local planner's green field and is beyond the planned boundary of the science park element of the SDL. If approved, this site would become, by my calculation, the third major extension to the already twice as big as ever planned science park. The proposed access itself is more extensive than needed merely to access the site, and is designed to enable and protect access to possible development sites beyond. These further sites appear not to feature in any council policy or document other than as green fields. So I ask what's going on here. These matters are discussed quite heavily within the reports before you, but somewhat dubious arguments are used to justify setting aside the planning protections on the site. If I may finish by posing a question, what exactly is the point of an expensively produced and very well consulted local plan and SDL if the planning authority rolls over and permits these plans to be effectively ignored when faced by a high-profile developer like the Natural History Museum? Thank you for listening.
Dave, thank you. And thank you for being admirably concise as well. We now have Phil Brown, who is the agent, I think, speaking for the application. And Phil, as you make your way forward, I'll just say the same rules apply. You have 3 minutes and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, committee. The University of Reading and the Natural History Museum have worked in partnership to develop their respective applications and bring them forward in parallel. The new access road will provide infrastructure to enable the delivery and operation of the NHM building. It is integral, therefore, to the achievement of the economic, social and environmental benefits associated with the new NHM building. The route of the road has been carefully chosen to minimise its impacts on existing habitats, landscape features and local views. The road has been designed in accordance with LTM 120 principles to encourage walking and cycling. It's suitable for use by buses, and land has been safeguarded to implement future footpath and transport corridor improvements. The road incorporates sustainable drainage features and provides space for street trees, planting and drainage features and green verges. Biodiversity enhancements will result in a 20% biodiversity net gain. The road therefore represents good design and will deliver high quality public realm. Cutbush Lane East will remain closed to traffic from TVSP, the British Museum and Shinfield Studios. Construction traffic will be controlled by a construction environmental management plan, reinforced through improved signage secured by your officers' conditions. Access is maintained to Upperwood Farm and the British Museum at all times. Upperwood Farmhouse is some 140 metres from the road, meaning that there won't be any impact on the amenities of the residents that live there. As well as enabling the delivery and operation of the NHM building and a wide range of benefits associated with it, the access road itself will bring about its own benefits, including local employment opportunities over the 18-month period of construction in the order of 35 construction jobs, an employment skills plan contribution of £15,000, biodiversity net gain of 20%, safeguarding of highway corridor land, and safeguarding of land for public rights-of-way improvements in the future. Your officers have concluded that the access road given its association with the NHM building and its good quality design and individual merits and benefits, represents an acceptable form of development. I hope that you will also agree that this application should be supported. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much. And again, thank you for the time. Could I just tell you to turn the microphone off as you leave? Thank you. It was made reference to in the officer's report, but we should recall the site visit that took place by the committee to see both this and the subsequent application 232833. From memory, all committee members were present other than Wayne. Did you make that one? No, so I think we were all there other than Wayne. Thank you. Right. Questions or comments on this from any members of the committee? But Rochelle, Andrew, Rochelle?
It was mentioned 115 new well-paid jobs will be available on this site. How many apprenticeships will be available for local students and local young people?
Anyone?
Andrew?
Yes, thank you, David. It would seem to me as a layperson that the access road, Spine Road, does include many commendable design features, and I acknowledge that. I would like, though, to ask officers for a brief response to the concerns raised by the resident, Mr. Green. And my understanding was that those concerns were twofold. Firstly, that this is a potential departure from the local plan. So I think it would be very helpful for everybody to understand exactly the circumstances, under which, that may be permitted. And also, I think that Mr. Green raised some concerns that the if granted, the access road might also help to facilitate, perhaps further, applications. And I would like if officers could please comment very specifically on those two issues. Thank you.
I think in terms of the departure from the local plan, and it is acknowledged in the report, it's not an allocated site, it's in countryside. The road will link onto the Natural History Museum, and that will deliver significant benefits. The local plan is always written at a point in time, and over time things evolve, and the timing of the updated local plan doesn't always keep up with that in terms of allocation. So we can't preclude applications coming forward in between a local plan with its current and a local plan update. We need to consider them on their merits for the planning benefits that have been cited within the report and in the context of the planning policies. So in this case, we felt, given the significant benefits that would be delivered by the facility, and together with a clustering potential for the site, which includes the University of Reading and the British Museum, that outweighed any significant harm in respect to that.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Yeah. Can I just ask about the how it connects to the sort of cycle path coming down from the bridge, the motorway bridge? I mean, currently you've got quite a downhill momentum as you're cycling. You're not going to be putting a load of those, like stupid barriers in the way and stuff to prevent, to block the existing cycle route?
You're quite correct. There is a strong desire line, particularly for cyclists, and the idea of the scheme is to provide a continuous route. The quality of the current route is degraded slightly because there are barriers at the moment, but you're right. Even at speed on a bike, you can still navigate them quite comfortably. I think every expectation is that there won't be formal barriers other than to preclude people driving inappropriately beyond where they should be. So one of the things we are doing, because it is a relatively quiet section, we are looking at the delivering street lighting along that section, which has also been a fairly balanced thing given the landscape impact. So we're actually looking at being a bit more adventurous and looking at some solar lights along that section where we think that's realistic and achievable. So there are lots of benefits. It's about getting all of those right and getting the balance right for everybody else. So.
Are there any further questions or comments from anybody? No? Okay, I'm assuming that's all comments are settled. So can I have a proposal? Tony? Yes. Do we have a seconder?
To include
Sure, yep.
supplementary.
Yeah, that will also need to include the items and this is in the supplementary agenda as well, which we have a chance to read. Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder. Those in favour that we approve this? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. And we therefore move to 232833. Chris, have you further to say on that?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Once again. So similar to the previous, the recommendations set out on this slide. I'll just get my notes. And finishing off with the recommendation for the Natural History Museum collection, that being application 232833. It should be noted, as mentioned by the Chair, that the member site visit was held in February. Whilst acknowledged in the report that a building associated infrastructure will be in the countryside and have a visual impact on the landscape, once again, as set out in the report, the benefits for the facility would significantly outweigh any harm. The application can be recommended for approval subject to the conditions in Section 106 agreement, and alternative recommendation C is put forward to refuse the application should a Section 106 agreement not be secured within 6 months of a committee resolution unless a longer period has been agreed. Just to the members' update, and there's just a couple of corrections, which just for clarity, we had a additional representation from Gary Cowan, Councillor Gary Cowan, which have been addressed within the update in terms of the comments raised there. Shinfield Parish Council withdrew their application withdrew the objection, following further work between the Natural History Museum and the Parish Council in terms of community engagement. And we had another email this morning just on the matter of speeding. It seems that the speed along that route is 20 miles an hour. It's not it's an advisory speed limit. And there is instances where cars are going faster than that, in most cases by about 5 miles an hour. But this is what you generally expect within in a site like that. So. And I think that was it from the update. There's a few changes to the conditions, but I've recited those so that they're set out in full for clarity. And I shall now hand back to the Chair.
Chris, thank you very much. We have again the same record of site visits as the previous application. We have one speaker for this, which is Nikki Brock, who's the agent. Nikki? Okay, thank you. Is that in order? Again, can I remind you, just have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair and members of the panel. Good to see you all. I'm Tim Littlewood, Director of Science at the Natural History Museum and Senior Responsible Owner for the programme that is unlocked. Both the museum and the programme are sponsored by our sponsoring Department of Culture, Media and Sports. So this is a fantastic opportunity to bring the NHM's flagship collections research and digitisation centre to Wokingham Borough. We at the Natural History Museum have a statutory duty to protect and make our collections accessible to current and future generations. The new state-of-the-art building will secure the NHM's irreplaceable collections and house cutting-edge research labs vital for understanding our planet and scientific innovation, and as a hub for collaborations and partnerships. The location strengthens links with the University of Reading and the existing research cluster, including the British Museum, developing across Thames Valley. Community outreach and engagement will occur in the area, similar to initiatives we lead from our sites in London and Tring. To ensure meaningful benefits are achieved through outreach work, a community engagement plan will be developed with the Parish Council and other stakeholders. The Thames Valley community will have employment opportunities both during construction and operation. We expect 150 people to be employed at the site, with at most 115 people on site at any time. Some will be from the local area and some will be apprentices. It's also expected that over 300 people will be employed per year during the construction of the building. Our planned zero carbon building exceeds local policy requirements under core strategy policy CP1 by 21% in carbon savings, reducing energy and water use, and with significant biodiversity gains as required by the local and neighbourhood plan. The proposed solar panels on the roof will produce 22% of the energy demand for the building, substantially exceeding the 10% policy requirement. The development will achieve a biodiversity net gain of 20% on site and at the adjacent Loddon Valley. Although the development does not strictly comply with the local plan countryside policies in terms of planning balance, any adverse impacts on the countryside are outweighed by the economic, social and sustainable benefits this facility would deliver. So on behalf of the project team who are in the room here today and all those we represent, it is respectfully requested that planning permission is granted. Members of the project team and I are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Timothy, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any member questions? For Andrew? Andrew, what was yours?
Thank you, David. I do have one question, but before I ask that question, I would like to note two of the items in the supplementary agenda pertaining to this application. I note that Councillor Cowan had made a representation, and I thank, which I've carefully read, and I thank the officers for their responses to the concerns that Councillor Cowan has raised. I also note a copy included in the supplementary agenda of an email dated the 8th of March from Shinfield Parish Council that says, quote, further to our conversation today, I confirm that the Shinfield Parish Council are content that the proposed conditions in respect of this application adequately address our concerns. And a number of those concerns relate to the community engagement strategy. And I note in the supplementary agenda that on page 110, that condition 26 is going to be replaced with a slightly different wording, which I'm very content with. But there is one question which I would like to ask, and that is that the wording says that the community engagement strategy shall be reviewed and updated every 5 years. I believe that's an excellent, approach. My question, is who will actually be responsible for achieving this, and can we have assurances, or is the intent that those people who have currently being involved in the community engagement strategy will continue to do so sort of in perpetuity?
Sandra. So the condition essentially is imposed upon the Natural History Museum. The council is working with the Natural History Museum as well as the parish, and the idea is that between the Natural History Museum, the university and the British Museum, that there'll be community engagement which involve obviously Shinfield Parish Council, local schools. So it's their obligation to review it, and we will be involved in that process, as will Shinfield Parish Council and any other local stakeholders. That could be schools who are involved in that as well.
Rochelle?
What's the biodiversity net gain from this project? Or is there any?
Yeah, it'd be 20% for this project.
Have any other questions? No? How?
I think perhaps worth for the general public, we're not asking many questions, but we have been, it should be noted that we have had presentations from the Natural History Museum, and we have had a lot of questions answered at those sort of preliminary meetings. So, and this report is the result of that. So that might be why it seems that we're not asking many questions over such a big project.
I think it's a well-made point. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no further questions, then would someone like to put forward a proposal? Andrew?
I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendations with the additions and amendments as set out in the supplementary agenda.
A seconder for that? Rochelle, second. Can I ask the committee members to vote that we accept this and approve this application? Yeah, that's unanimous. So the application is approved, and thank you very much, and to the presentation from the Natural History Museum. Right. The next item on the agenda is item 76. We've had a special request from Councillor Charles Margetts, but as far as I can tell, hasn't managed to sneak into the room as yet. Not yet. He is hastening this way. So because Councillor Margetts is not yet present, we're going to change the agenda item or the agenda order by one item only. So we will advance up the agenda item 77, which is application 232560 for White House Farm, Beach Hill. My apologies to the residents connected to the item 76, but we'll bear with us to give Charles a chance to arrive. So the case officer for this is Andrew Chunk. You there? Andrew there? Yes. 7 moments. Yes. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I should just share my screen, 2 seconds. This application is for a change of use of agricultural, residential, light industrial and storage lands to an arboretum with ancillary facilities. The ancillary buildings would include storage, laboratory, office and auditorium space for the purpose of a private scientific research facility associated with the Arboretum. The applicant is a professional tree care specialist and carries out scientific research into the spread and treatment of pest and disease control on trees and shrubs. The application site is approximately 10 hectares in size and is located out of settlement in the countryside to the southwest of Spencer's Wood, approximately 400 metres from the boundary with West Berkshire District Council. The site is currently accessed via 2 vehicle accesses onto Yew Tree Lane and 1 onto White House Lane. The site primarily comprises of open agricultural land plus light industrial and storage buildings and a mobile home. The northwestern corner of the site is protected deciduous woodland. The existing White House Farm is outside of the application site but within the applicant's ownership. Refer to the location plan on page 273 in your main agenda. The proposal will be delivered over 2 phases, with the auditorium, arrival space and group external area arriving in the 2nd phase of development. The core facilities comprising the offices, laboratory and maintenance building will be built out during the 1st phase of works, as indicated in the phasing plan details provided at 239 and 240 on your main agenda. The proposal represents a sustainable rural enterprise within the countryside and is therefore acceptable in principle. It would deliver a high quality development with an excellent BREEAM rating that would respect the existing rural woodland character of the site. It would also help remediate and enhance previously despoiled land on parts of the application site. The proposal would facilitate in a significant amount of new tree planting that would be comprehensively and professionally managed by the applicant and would introduce new wetland habitats to secure a biodiversity net gain of at least 30% across the application site. The proposal would be acceptable in terms of its potential traffic impacts, car parking, flooding, drainage, residential amenity, and mineral resource impacts, and would not result in any permanent loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. Adequate measures will be secured via condition to ensure that the development could be accommodated within the council's existing Atomic Weapons Establishment AWE Burfield off-site plan arrangements. As indicated in the supplementary agenda, the applicant's name was inadvertently missing off the main report. The applicant is Bartlett Tree Experts. The application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions and informative detailed in the main agenda. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you. We have one speaker for this application who's speaking for it, which is Neil Davis, the agent. Neil? And again, you have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. The proposed development and use of the site in the manner proposed should be welcomed by the council. The applicant, Bartlett Tree Experts, are an international world-renowned scientific tree and shrub care company, and this proposal will establish a centre of excellence in this field. The proposed Arboretum will be the principal leading factor in achieving this aim. The location of the site with the land around it to accommodate the Arboretum is essential to its success. The motivation for acquiring the site with its extensive area of open fields is to provide the space required to plant a new Arboretum at the site. Bartlett currently operate from a site leased from the University of Reading on Cutbush Lane East, Shinfield. This lease is set to terminate, and this has led to them acquiring the White House Farm site and surrounding land. Having the necessary space afforded to achieve the Arboretum is fundamental to the entire future plans of the applicants. Their existing locality does not provide the necessary space or environment to establish the Arboretum and for the company to develop in the local area. The proposed ancillary supporting facilities, which comprise of an auditorium, communal space and research, office and maintenance wings, will be built in 2 phases, with the intention that it will become Bartlett's long-term home. This will allow them to continue to contribute to the borough as a highly skilled employer and to maintain their close links with the University of Reading. As the site will be a private scientific research establishment, external visits to the Arboretum will be controlled and visits arranged through a private company. The proposed use of the site provides for substantial benefits, which include protection of the countryside and its open spaces and trees, significant environmental benefits, including to existing protected trees and hedgerows, as well as to biodiversity. Buildings of a high quality design using natural materials and lightweight glazed links to minimise scale and bulk. A BREEAM rating of 79.8% of available credits, equivalent to an excellent rating. As a result of the applicant's efforts to engage with the local authority throughout the process, there were no objections from any internal or external consultees, and they offer their strong support for the proposals. These include the landscape officer, ecologist, highways, drainage, and the emergency planners. As a result, I would formally request that members support the officer recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Neil, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I ask you to turn your microphone off as you leave the table, please? Thank you. If any members of the committee wish to talk, speak, comment, I've got Wayne, Michael, Rochelle. I can't hear everybody. Wayne, Michael, Rochelle, and Al. Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not against. I'm supportive of it. As per the gentleman said, it's a great feature and it's something we should welcome. My interest lies in page 270, Andrew. Item number 7, the AWEDPZ. And I'm just wondering how we've squared the circle there, because I was always under the impression that they were against housing, i.e., let's not forget Graiseley, which was the spanner was thrown in the works by the DPZ, and I was always under the impression that people working at such a site in the DEPZ, they frowned upon and it wasn't allowed. So I'm just interested. I'm more interested then there's no objection from me, but I'm just interested how you overcame that.
Can I just say, for the point of view of the audience, AWPDZ is the atomic weapons exclusion zone around the facility at Burfield.
Yes, thank you. So we have had detailed discussions with our emergency planners, also West Berkshire, also the Office for Nuclear Protection as well. So in answer to your question, Wayne, in terms of new housing within the DEPZ, at the present, the view is really very much no, that's not going to be accepted. What we're dealing with here is a different type of use. Obviously, it's a business use as such. Also, as part of this proposal, there's a net loss. There's a existing mobile home to be removed on site as well. So whilst there are people working on site, they can be controlled in terms of like a potential off-site plan in the very unlikely event that something would happen at AWE. So it's a much less risk perceived by the emergency planners than new housing as such. So on that basis, they're happy to secure conditions for end user and construction phase emergency plans, which will be part of a condition on the permission.
Well done.
Michael?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Andrew, I just want to perhaps a little bit of clarification, but you actually mentioned in your speech about traffic impact, and I know that Beach Hill Road is a country lane. I used to drive down there to work on many occasions when I worked in Basingstoke, and I'm just really wondering, following all this proposed development, would there be an increase in traffic because the businesses themselves are changing quite drastically? Thank you.
Thanks. I really don't think there's likely to be a significant increase in trips from discussions we've had with our highways colleagues, such that it would have any significant impact in terms of traffic flows or convenience of accessing the site or surrounding area. So that wasn't considered to be a problem.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? Would you think they might be less traffic, or is that really putting you on the spot?
I'll pass over to Alan on that one, if that's okay.
Sorry, yes. You're quite right, Councillor. There are, whilst the traffic flows are modest on that road, they're not very quiet. And in terms of daily flow variations, quite common for those to be sort of 6-7% up or down a bit. So it's very difficult to kind of put your finger on actual numbers. In theory, by removing the residential dwelling and replacing it with a commercial operation, there might be a very slight increase, but equally there might be a very slight decrease. So I think we consider it just as neutral.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that because when I used to drive down, I used to frequently meet horses down that bit of road. And I don't know if they still ride down there, but you do give them a very wide berth and they're grateful for it, because I've been riding before and it can be quite scary.
We'll have next, Michelle.
I noticed the applicant doesn't really want people visiting. I wondered if they would consider outreach to some of the Wokingham schools, along with the University of Reading, to explain to them what they're doing and possibly to inspire some young people to go into science, because we have a lot more science going in Wokingham now, especially in the science park, than in any other area, probably in southern England. So we should use it to inspire our youth.
Al?
Just picking up on what the agent said, that they're going to be working on tree diseases. I mean, is there any risk to trees outside of this arboretum from this development? You know, if you're you know, how contained will these diseases be?
I'm sure our ecologist is going to consider that, and if that had been an issue, it would have been factored in terms of like biodiversity net gain or risks in terms of securing that biodiversity net gain. The application actually came in prior to the introduction of the 10% requirement for biodiversity net gain, but it's still, far exceeding kind of that. That's why there isn't a specific condition in terms of that, but it is defined on condition 18I in terms of the detailed woodland management plan. So those measures in there will secure over and above the biodiversity net gain. Specifically in terms of diseases, they are specialists in the field. So Brian, if you wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'll just on the point of any kind of scientific research, whether it's on a university campus or whether it's industrial processes, anything that the planning system wouldn't necessarily be the regime that we would monitor and regulate. For example, testing, biomedicine, etc. With trees, any kind of scientific or tests, it wouldn't be us that would be doing that. The same with any other business that was undertaking tests of any kind.
Any further comments or questions? Got Bill?
Yeah, thank you. Just a question on the event parking. Just to wonder where the access to the event parking is and what sort of numbers you're expecting at any one time at an event, and is there parking spaces? I can't see how that's actually laid out there.
Yes, thank you. The event parking would be the most southerly access off of Beach Hill Road, and I think we have 15 proposed parking spaces. Currently, there are 5 existing parking spaces. As has been identified, it's not publicly accessible. So the movements to and from the site, whether there's maybe there might be a forum or something on, would be tightly controlled to make sure those movements are contained appropriately within the site. Yeah.
Any further comments? If I just add one myself, which is rarely do we see an application coming before this committee that seems to conduct quite such a lot of benefits as this one does. Were they all as good as this? If there's no further comments, I'm going to ask for a proposal. Wayne? I'm presuming you're proposing we accept it. Yeah, there's a second. Bill? Those in favour? Yeah, I think that's passed unanimously. Thank you. Right. In the ongoing absence of Councillor Margett, I'm afraid we can delay no longer. So we are going to now move to item 76, which is application 223528. As previously indicated, I'm going to have to withdraw from the meeting at this point. Councillor Mickleborough will take over the chair. Councillor Margett, who's the ward member concerned, if he arrives, it's up to the chair as to whether we can then speak. But we do have, in any case, a copy of Charles's address, which Andrew will read out in Charles's absence. I'm now going to have to withdraw from the meeting, and I think Councillor Marshall, say from the parish, has got a question, but I'm going to leave that to Andrew to pick up, if I may.
Vice Chair, can you just give us a moment to set up? That's great.
Yes, as the Chair explained, the next application is number 223528, 33 Barkham Ride, and the officer is Connie Davis. Thank you, Connie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, there's an update report for this item which clarified the time limit for the completion of the Section 106 agreement as part of the recommendation, and some further commentary on biodiversity and in particular badgers. This application relates to 33 Barkham Ride, which currently comprises of a single large residential dwelling and outbuildings. The proposal is for outline planning permission for 56 residential dwellings, with only access to be considered. It should be noted that other matters relating to scale of the development, appearance, layout and landscaping are all reserved for future consideration. An indicative site layout plan has been provided. However, it is important to reiterate that this is not fixed or finalised at this stage. The site is located in the Wokingham countryside, adjacent to Finch Hampstead North settlement limits. However, it is allocated for residential development within the local plan update revised growth strategy. The site is allocated for a net increase of 66 dwellings across the site and 31 Barkham Ride, which is located to the west beyond Victoria Gardens. Since the local plan update, the Finch Hampstead neighbourhood plan was adopted and it accepts this allocation.
Bear with us, the presentation doesn't seem to be moving forward.
Apologies about that. There we go. Whilst allocated as one site in the local plan update, it is important to reiterate that 31 and 33 are two separate sites and are currently subject to two separate planning applications. An outline application at 31 has been submitted for 26 dwellings, which is currently under consideration. As such, each have to be determined on their own merits. Notwithstanding this, officers are mindful of the cumulative impact of these two developments and other developments on Barkham Ride, which have featured in a number of objections to this specific scheme. Particular concern was raised over the quantum of development at 31 and 33 combined, given it would be above the site allocation in the local plan update. At present, the number of dwellings across the sites equates to 82, which is 14 dwellings over the site allocation. However, it should be noted that dwelling numbers in the allocations are indicative minimums, with a higher quantum of development only being able to be resisted if it results in some identified harm. In this case, the dwellings per hectare is comparable to other surrounding developments. The cumulative impact of the developments would have the cumulative impact on the highway network has also been raised as a concern, with further detail on this in the main report. The speed limit of Barkham Ride is a particularly prominent comment and has arisen. And whilst there is no highway need to alter the speed limit to encompass the access of this development, this is something that is being explored under the application at 31. Although not a material consideration to this planning application, the Council's Community, Corporate and Overview Scrutiny Committee have discussed ways to ensure effective oversight of council-led projects on Barkham Ride during construction phases. The communication strategy that would be secured via condition on this application could then feed into any wider council oversight. As mentioned, this application is required to be assessed on its own merits. So returning to this development itself, the principle of 56 residential dwellings is accepted and has the potential to be satisfactorily accommodated in relation to trees, the natural environment and the surrounding landscape, whilst keeping a sufficient portion of the site retained as open space, as can be seen on the indicative site plan. However, full details, including building types, heights, designs and positioning, are all reserved for future consideration and do not form part of the detailed assessment of the application here tonight. This is also the case for boundary treatment, which officers acknowledge will be particularly essential on the western boundary with Victoria Gardens. In terms of access, the proposal sees the stopping up of the existing access and repositioning it further west. The proposal has been robustly reviewed by WBC highway officers, and it demonstrates that in principle, the development would provide a safe access and the increase in traffic generation that would arise can be accommodated within the existing highway network. The site is also deemed to be a suitably sustainable location with walking, cycling and bus routes to local amenities. To conclude, the borough cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the tilted balance is engaged. As per the NPPF, where this is engaged, the shortfalls of the scheme have to be substantially and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, officers have identified a number of positive elements of the scheme, such as providing a variety of housing, which includes smaller units, a compliant affordable housing provision, public open space, all in a location that is deemed sustainable and can integrate with the highway network. These outweigh any shortfalls that may be identified. Officers fully appreciate the cumulative impact of this development with those elsewhere on Barkham Ride, and so whilst each application does need to be determined on its own merits, hopefully it has been demonstrated that cumulative impact has still been considered, particularly in terms of the highway network. The recommendation is therefore to grant outline planning permission, subject to the conditions and obligations outlined in the main report. However, I should add that today the British Horse Society have provided a further representation requesting an additional condition to be included on the permission to reinstate Cook Lane, which is considered to be a historical bridleway that runs along the northern boundary of the site across Victoria Gardens and 31 Barkham Ride. This matter was discussed in section 10.29 of the main report. In order to have this route recognised, a definitive map modification order application has been submitted by the British Horse Society. However, this is still pending consideration by the council. Therefore, as it stands, Cook Lane is not a recognised route to be re-established, and if it were, agreement from multiple landowners would be needed as it crosses multiple sites. Furthermore, officers are mindful of potential conflict of the bridleway with TPO trees on the northern boundary of the site. As such, the condition is not considered to meet the required tests in that it is not necessary to make this development acceptable, particularly given it has not been requested by WBC public rights of way officers. As such, the list of conditions recommended in the main report remains unaltered. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. The first speaker is Roger Marchalet from the Parish Council. Good evening, Roger. As usual, you have 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. My name is Roger Marchalet. I'm speaking here as representing Finchampstead Parish Council. Now, the last time I spoke to you was on the 15th of December when we were talking about a house at 104 9 Mile Ride. And I was somewhat critical at the time because in the recommendation for that property, negligible interest or concern had been expressed about the neighbourhood development plan that has very recently become valid. I'm happy to say that this particular application, much more notice has been taken of the neighbourhood development plan, particularly with regard to particular policy ES1, which is relating to carbon neutral housing, and hopefully that when we get to the reserve matters application, that will be included. But unfortunately, this is a complex application in some respects, because originally the site was 3133 Barkham Ride, when it was entered as in the call for sites. And that was, I believe, for 70 houses. And we took that through into the neighbourhood development plan. And so the neighbourhood development plan is accepting that 70 houses can be built on the site comprising 31 and 33 Barkham Ride. Unfortunately, that has now been split into two sites, 33 and separately 31. And the one we're dealing with today, 33, is for 56 houses. And there is an application already in, but has not yet been got as far as committee yet, for the other site, for I think it's got it written down here somewhere. 26, thank you. Which takes it to 80 houses. So we're now effectively looking at an increase of 14% on the number of houses that we had specified in the neighbourhood development plan. And on that basis, I would ask you to seriously consider this application and to see if this anomaly, historical anomaly, can be rectified in some way, possibly by taking the two sites together in some respects and ensuring that the neighbourhood development plan is not contravened by this application. So on this basis, I'd ask you to reject it at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. The next speaker is Hugh Reid, a resident. Good evening, Mr. Reid.
Good evening.
Once again, you have 3 minutes.
My family lives directly opposite 33 Barkham Ride, and I'm also speaking on behalf of many other immediate neighbours, some of whom are here tonight. Our key concerns are more traffic, higher housing density, and the visual aspects of this development. Peak traffic on Barkham Ride is already a nightmare. Many of us have had near misses driving out into busy traffic. Speeding and disregard of the 6'6" width restriction are common and never properly policed. This situation also poses significant dangers to many bow hunt school children and elderly walkers crossing Barkham Ride to reach the bridleway to California Country Park. The fundamental issue is simply the sheer volume of traffic on a narrow country road. Measured yesterday by video, there were 1,060 vehicles in 1 hour. That's 28% higher than the 830 vehicle baseline in this report. The claimed small traffic increase of 4% for this development certainly needs revisiting. On Barkham Ride, there's no real alternative to using a car. Bus services are infrequent, non-existent on Sundays. Walking is impossible going westwards as there is no pavement. Going eastwards, the pavement's narrow, leaving one uncomfortably close to speeding traffic. Cycling is there for the brave or foolish and is mostly avoided. In fact, our grandchildren are actually banned from cycling to visit us. This part of Barkham Ride already contains a high number of T-junctions in a short space, including this development, 6 T-junctions in under 200 metres. T-junctions are, by a large margin, the most frequent location for accidents. Not a good idea where bow hunt school children and elderly walkers cross the road. Finchampstead is a very pleasant area with rural aspects. Could we have the next slide, please, William? Yeah, thank you. Finchampstead is a very pleasant area with rural aspects and modest housing density. We are therefore concerned that this development is the thin end of the wedge in turning the western end of the settlement on Barkham Ride into a higher housing density area. The development proposes 56 dwellings on 29 hectares, shown in red on the slide. The next most dense area, fronting Barkham Ride, shown in yellow, contains only 42 dwellings. That's a 33% increase and risks compromising the semi-rural aspects of this area. Further developments on 31 and 24 Barkham Ride are also under consideration. They're shown in orange. Finally, I'll try to end on a positive note and compliment the planning team on their intent to achieve good visual screening. That seems to work. However, our serious concerns over increases in traffic and housing density remain, so we therefore respectfully request the committee to reject this development. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Next, I'd like to call Nathan Craker, the agent, please. Good evening, Nathan. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. My name's Nathan Craker and I'm from Olivia Homes. We've been working with officers on this site for some time and we're obviously pleased to see the officers are recommending planning permission be granted subject to the conditions and obligations set out in the report. Looking at the wording of the report, it is detailed, well considered, and we would agree draws the correct conclusions. I just wanted to cover a couple of points and highlight some of the benefits of the scheme, which I hope are helpful to you. The plan at figure 1 on page 159 of the committee papers is useful as it shows the site within its context, being surrounded on 3 sides by existing development and Barkham Ride on the other. It is contiguous with the edge of the settlement, which is a modest development location, which by definition is a sustainable location for new development. In this way, the site can benefit from the proximity of existing services, as well as contribute to the improvement of others, such as the number 3 Leopard bus service. The site, which will not increase the number of access points onto Barkham Ride, may therefore be said to be sustainably located. The principle of development is also consistent with the revised growth strategy and the Finch Hampstead Neighbourhood Plan, both of which support the site as a proposed allocation for housing in combination with number 31. In time, number 31, which lies to the west of Victoria Gardens, would form the new settlement edge. Your officers at para 20.8 consider that it is appropriate for this site to have a lower density to create a soft development edge and respectful transition to the adjacent Brooks Nest Sang, and we consider this a sensible approach. Turning to the benefits of the scheme, the provision of housing and importantly affordable housing is of headline benefit, given the current housing land supply position and the engagement of the presumption. As well as meeting the headline mix of 40% affordable housing, the 10-year mix has been agreed with the council, with 70% being for social rented housing, meeting the council's priority needs. The report lists the planning benefits of the scheme, including improvements to sustainable transport, carbon neutral housing, but I would add to this the 10% net gain in biodiversity, which is a tangible benefit. The conclusions reached by your officers is that there are significant benefits to the scheme and that in a balanced consideration of these against the areas of harm, the conclusion is that these are outweighed and that permission should be granted. We agree with this assessment and I hope members will support the recommendation here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craco. Good to see you, Councillor Margetts. Okay, perfect timing. If you'd like to take the floor, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, this site is outside the settlement boundary. The total site, 31 and 33 Barkham Ride, was in the draft local plan for 66 houses. There are 26 static homes already on the Victoria Gardens site, part of 31 to 33 Barkham Ride. This application is for 56 houses and there's another for 28 houses at 31 Barkham Ride. If all were approved, this means 112 houses will be built when the plan indicated 66. I had previously asked officers to present both 31 and 33 to the committee together to give the planning committee a full and accurate picture of what's proposed here. They did not agree to do this. This land was presented as one site and has now been split into 3 to exploit planning. Approving it would see significant overdevelopment over what was intended. The application contradicts many WBC policies. The officer's report admits it does not comply with CP 9 or 11. The location is not sustainable and any development here would simply lead to more car use. There's a footpath leading to Finch Hampstead with one shop within 10 minutes walk. There's no access to Barkham on foot. The bus service is below the specified level. The bus does not go near the nearest railway station at Crowthorne. Barkham Ride is 6'6" wide with tall hedges on either side of the road. When you walk on the pavement, buses and vans pass less than a metre away from you. Residents will tell you no cyclists use the road as it's not safe. The NHS primary care network advises local GPs are over capacity with no firm plans for expansion. Officers say there is capacity at Finchampstead surgery. However, this does not allow for many houses under construction at Arboretum who will also need a GP. The site does not comply with CP6. CP3 states that the development should be an appropriate scale, mass and layout without detriment to local land users. This development does not do so. On either side, there are single-storey buildings, and it does not comply with CP3. I understand the principle of the tilted balance. However, this application fails in so many ways that even with the tilted balance, it's my view it should not be approved. I know you're meant to consider planning applications separately. However, I would ask you do consider the scale of developments already agreed for Barkham Ride, where there are no plans to upgrade the road. WBC plans to build 2 large SEND schools, a solar farm, a COVID wood, an adult services residential home, and a Gypsy and Roma pitch on the road. There's also the planning application at 31 Barkham Ride, and I understand 3 further pre-applications for housing. It's in poor condition. Based on WBC Highways figures, 60 sets of roadworks in 2 years. The infrastructure is stretched and cannot take further development. I'd ask the committee to refuse even this application. The video you've seen for the benefit of the planning committee was provided to me by a resident. That fence on there borders the site. That's a badger running into it. Just to give you some explanation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret. So that concludes our list of registered speakers. Before we take questions from members, I would like to have recorded in the minutes that the site visit took place on the 8th of March and was attended by all members except Councillors Cornish and Sowan. I think that is correct. Thank you. I would also like to make a short statement, to help us to ensure that the questions and discussion remains focused on the task ahead. This is an outline application focused on site access. If approved, subject to the conditions and obligations in the recommendation on page 149 and page 5 on the supplementary agenda, the number of dwellings would be fixed at a maximum of 56, and all other matters would be reserved. It would certainly be my intention to exercise the opportunities available to seek this, to bring this back to committee at the reserved matters stage, should various stakeholders wish, and I would appreciate if that could be minuted. It is acknowledged in the officer's report that this is in the countryside, does not meet any of the exception criteria, and is therefore contrary to policy CP11. However, the overall aim of CP11 must be considered. If approved, would this harm the separate identity of settlements? Any adverse impacts would need to be significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The 22 affordable homes would be widely regarded to be a very significant benefit. The site is allocated within the LPU revised growth strategy and supported in the Finchampstead Neighbourhood Development Plan. Are there questions from members? Okay, I see Michael first. I'll make a list to sort of a first pass. Rochelle? Tony? Others in the first pass? And Wayne, thank you. Others will have an opportunity, of course, later. Okay, so Michael.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually. It's mentioned, I think Councillor Margette's mentioned it about the traffic. I think rather resident as well about traffic along Barkham Ride. So I've got concerns over the impact of traffic along that road following this potential planning application, and I'm just really waiting any comments on that about increases of the traffic and what will happen then. And I've got another question in a minute.
I think Mr. Reid kind of outlined a number of very good, well-researched points in terms of his objection, so thank him for that, obviously. And we have interrogated this at significant length, and I appreciate that there's been a range of developments and a range of road works that have occurred at different times. Again, the ward councillor is kind of very confidently put some of those points as well. It's right that the traffic flows they vary daily anyway, as I mentioned on the other application, and sometimes they're significantly more. What we're seeing in recent areas is where there is roadworks, either in Finch Hampstead, Barkham, and Arboretum, there are variations in traffic flows. So we do see a significant range of flows along Barkham Ride as a consequence, and that is important. In as far as that road's only suitable for a certain volume of traffic. There is a balance to be struck. The road most of the time is consistently around 8,500 vehicles per day, which is quite busy for a road type that it is, and it is about 5 meters wide in places. There's lots of comments about HGVs. Actually, in terms of the observations of flow, the HGV flows are around about 4%, but actually whilst that's significant in its own, given that there is a 6'6" limit there, actually 63 vehicles a week that are the larger HGVs, and most of those appear to be associated with some of the land uses on that lane who have the exception to that 6'6" limit. So taking those into account, and in particular this application, if the traffic flows are higher, then the proportional impact of the development traffic would be lower. So even taking the lowest of the flows that we've observed, the scale of development of 56 dwellings represents less than 2% increase in traffic. Now, of course, that's still important, but most of it as a residential development.
Can I remind all the members of the public that they are not to engage in discussion or to interrupt the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So whilst it is still important in terms of that traffic, it's largely light traffic associated with a residential development, and on balance, the scale, in our view, is sufficiently low. We clearly, as a council, need to work on improving accessibility to this part of the borough. And one of the things that we are making good progress on, I believe, is improving the connections, particularly to Bohunt School, supporting and enhancing the rights of way network to join parts of the network together to deliver those safe routes. It's important to the council because we end up having to pay for home to school travel. So we are working diligently towards that. And there are other plans that we need to carefully balance, both the landscape impact of introducing additional footways and the drainage along Barkham Ride, which is fairly limited because it generally drains off the road into the ditch. So there's some competition for space that is available. So that's something we're working on and we will continue to work on. And part of the solar farm application, which is already there, is already introducing some of the drainage improvements that are needed that aren't there currently. So there are steps that are being taken. They are, on individual applications, improvements are being delivered where they're able. Here, a different access position, preserving and moving away from the very sensitive oak trees at the access and to give them space to kind of regrow and develop further. So all in all, the measures to ultimately extend the speed limit to what may become the new settlement boundary will help reinforce a number of the issues that have been raised in concern. And on behalf of the Highway Authority, we're satisfied that the application as it stands is entirely adequate. There's no conflict with policies and safety as we see it.
Thank you, Alan. Michael, you have a further question?
I've got another one, actually. This is to do with affordable housing. Is there a danger that 22 affordable housing dwellings being reduced? Because we've seen that before.
So the maximum amount of dwellings that this application will permit is 56. However, in theory, at reserved matters stage, that number could be reduced, and therefore the amount of affordable housing would subsequently be reduced. But in order for the applicant to deviate away from the 40% required, a viability assessment would have to be provided. So it wouldn't be reduced unless adequate information and proper scrutiny was undertaken by the affordable housing team.
Michael? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so I'll read from that. There is a danger the affordable housing level could be reduced.
Theoretically, yes. It could be negotiated because at the moment it's not clear how many houses will eventually come forward, and given the layout of the site is not known for sure, there's still a lot at play at the moment, and I assume the developer will have to go away and sort of negotiate these things, which may then play a part in the overall viability of the site. So we would hope not, but I can't guarantee.
Could I just jump in there as well? I guess one thing to remember with any development proposal, councillor and committee, is that obviously what occurs in the future we can't control, and the system does allow changes to a planning permission by virtue of it being outline and reserve matters. There are some things that are applicable to every application, and this site is no different from any other residential scheme, which may, if necessary and adequate justification is provided, may change in future.
Yeah, I kind of just ask it because it happened in my ward.
Well, it sounds, Michael, as though you would be in favour of bringing this matter back to at the reserved matters stage. So
only if this committee is minded to approve it.
Right, Rachel.
A couple of questions. You mentioned tilted balance, which is due to our 5-year land supply, not lack of 5-year land supply, and therefore we have to consider this in a different vein than we would normally. The second question I've got is 56 houses. We're looking at just this application. We're not looking at the other 3 that they might possibly put in. They might be in the process of doing that or not. We're just considering this one right now without anything else to do with it. At the future, we may consider those other ones to see if it's too many houses, but right now 56 is perfectly within the limits that we allow.
So in answer to your first question, yes, the tilted balance is engaged because the borough doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. In answer to your second question, you are correct that we are only assessing this application. If this application were to be approved and at a later date an application at 31 Barkham Ride was presented to the committee, this current application at 33 would then be a material consideration because it's an extant permission, a nearby site. However, the way round it is at the moment, the one at 31 is still pending consideration and no decision has been made on it. So it's not there's no definitives there because nothing has been approved. So that's why the focus is on this one.
Would you also like to explain to the audience what tilted balance actually means, because they have no idea?
Oh, okay. Yes. So tilted balance, it was discussed in the report, but it essentially means that if a borough, if a council can't demonstrate that it has a 5-year housing land supply, its policies are then deemed out of date. And if the policies are out of date, the NPPF, which is the National Planning Policy Framework, has a paragraph, paragraph 11, which states that if a council doesn't have an up-to-date local plan, a 5-year housing land supply, then applications for residential development should be granted unless the harm in doing so would substantially and demonstrably outweigh any benefits. So the balance is tilted towards being in favour of development because the policies are out of date. So to bring the balance back and to tilt it the other way, the harm has to be substantially and demonstrably outweighed. And those are the two words that are used in the NPPF itself. So our job here as officers is to work out if any harm substantially and demonstrably outweighs all the benefits that we have identified. And that is how we've reached the conclusion that any harm doesn't weigh against the development to that great extent. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Connie. Tony?
Thank you. I find I've got points in favour and points against this scheme. I like the degree of affordable housing that's being proposed here. The concern of the residents and other people, interested parties here, are really about the traffic on Barkham Ride, and particularly at busy times. I noticed you were talking about moving the point at which the speed limit would change. Can you tell us a little bit more about where you might, how far you might move that?
Yeah, thank you. It's probably perfect question for me to actually make a clarification. So for those that were on the site visit, we did explore that very question, and I gave you an answer, and it wasn't entirely correct. So that was presented a moment ago in the officer's report. So I went back and checked for committee, and the speed survey that was done at the site actually shows that observed speeds are close to the 30-mile-an-hour limit that we would expect them to be, even at the point of new access. So although the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is slightly east of the current site, speeds, the 85th percentile speed is 35 miles an hour coming into the settlement, 40 miles an hour coming out, which would be broadly consistent with people accelerating into the rural area. So there isn't actually a need to relocate the speed limit, but it's certainly our intention, on the basis that the new settlement boundary, when it does become fixed, that there would be a speed limit. So that planning obligation has provisionally been identified to come with the next site when it comes forward. But obviously we can take direction from the committee if you feel very strongly otherwise.
Thank you, Alan. Tony?
There is a case, I think, for moving that speed limit a little further down the road, just to slow the traffic up before this site, and that might make it a little bit more acceptable and make it easier for people to get out of their drives, etc.
So, Tony, when we come to consider a recommendation, on this, I wonder whether you might consider some wording, to capture that, and not simply the location, of the at the speed limit, its extent, its location, but also possibly the timing, for making, any such changes. Thank you. Do you have any further questions, Tony? Thank you. Wayne?
Right. Let me start at the beginning. I did ask this when we were on site. So we are talking about 56 plus the 26. When this was... Hold on. I haven't finished. 56 in the local plan, it was 70 based on 31 and 33. We've now got 26 in the middle, which are mobile homes. So this site becomes 56 plus 26 in terms of the cumulative effect of what was in the local plan. What was in the local plan was 70. I know you're telling me that we're not discussing the three sites together, but the cumulative effect is 108 versus 70. That's as I understand it, and listening to what people have said this evening. And I did ask for clarity. So what I'm seeking now, take off the 2631. This site is 56 plus 26, because when this was envisaged as a site, you're shaking your head, Rachel, but I don't think you get the point I was making on site. Those mobile homes weren't in the local plan when it was set up. It was 31 and 33, not 31A or Victoria Gardens. So can I just have clarity on that?
Yes, so this question has been asked of the policy team as well. They confirmed that it's 66 net increase in the revised growth strategy across 31 and 33. That was envisaged above and beyond Victoria Gardens. So it appears that, yeah, Victoria Gardens was there and had been accounted for, but the 66 net increase across 31 and 33 was on top of the 26 at Victoria Gardens. Yeah.
I didn't realise that was in the original numbers when we worked at 31 and 33. You're saying that is definitely the case?
That's what the policy team have advised, yes, that the amount in the local plan update is above what is at Victoria Gardens.
Net gain of 66 across both sites. So 31 would be 10 in theory. Okay. It is a shame because, you know, we're in this position because we don't have a local plan. That's the fact. And we haven't calculated our 5-year land supply since April 22. That's another fact. So we haven't had an updated 5-year land supply number since April 22. Now, you can challenge me on that, but I can tell you it's absolutely categorically the position, because when it was calculated in December 22, the number was calculated based on the position we had in April. So we're nearly 2 years without this committee knowing where we are on the 5-year land supply. And I bet you didn't even know that. And that's not a good position for this committee to be in. But you can challenge me on that, Brian, but please come back to me, because I've been asking for an updated number. I ask for it every month and I don't get it. It was last calculated on the 13th of December, 22, for a 200 site in Hurst. So that's why I know it, because that's my ward. So it's very difficult for people to relate to the position we're here, because we're all sitting here. And ideally, this wouldn't go through because it's unsustainable, as has been mentioned by lots of residents, or as is mentioned in here by lots of residents. But we're now in a position where we get back to the tilted balance. That's why the 5-year land supply is so important, because we don't have the up-to-date figures. And that's why I get frustrated every time we come here. I was frustrated last month, and I will keep getting frustrated until we get the numbers. But there you are. So this, for me, is purely down on sustainability. The traffic, as we saw when we were there, and I know you know, Tony's made the point about the 30 miles per hour speed limit, which I think is essential. But the other thing we've got to consider here is, can you imagine what's going to happen every morning when 56 properties, which would, based on the numbers of the borough, which is 2.4 cars per dwelling, are going to get out of one entrance? They're going to come out of that entrance. Can you imagine what that's going to be like in that development? So I said my points, but I will come back reserved. But I do really think that we're sat around this table month in, month out, and we haven't got an updated position on our 5-year land supply.
Okay, I'd like to seek officer responses to those two questions. Okay, the first question, could somebody please explain why we don't have an updated or a recent figure for the 5-year land supply? What are the reasons for this?
To clarify, we do. I know you sort of it sounds like there's a contradiction there, but the updated housing land supply was published publicly first as part of the Watmore Lane appeal, and then it was made available on the 26th of January, we believe. It's in public circulation. I'm not sure why or if members have had access to that, if they've not been involved in either that appeal or they've asked the question since then. It can be made available. It is publicly available as we speak. I mean, I can clarify the position if councillors would feel that is beneficial. The position was published as of the council's housing land supply at the 31st of March 23, so a year after the 2022 position. And the deliverable supply was 3.2 years, which is 2,545 dwellings over the 5-year period. We need 795 dwellings over that period. That position has reduced from the previous position of 2022, which was 3.95 years, which was March 22. That's been publicly made available. That's in the report, paragraph 3.15.
Thank you, Brian. And, should there be further questions or clarification requested from any members on this, then I think we should deal with that outside of the meeting. The second line of questioning was the volume of vehicles that may be attempting to leave the site at peak times.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor. First off, I apologise. I perhaps pulled a face. I wasn't sure whether I misheard you or not. So in terms of the development forecast, you're quite right that the transport statement does have a higher figure, but on the basis that through the course of the application, the number of dwellings was reduced. So the development actually forecast to generate around 28 2A peak movements. In and out of the development. And now, as a consequence of that, yes, that does, as I said, represent somewhere in the order of 1.6, 1.8% increase in traffic, depending on its distribution and time and which day of the week, because the flows are quite variable. And as I said, that has a significant impact, partly because of the time of year that some of the surveys have been done and some of the variations of roadworks that have increased or decreased the traffic at different times.
Thank you, Alan. Wayne, do you have further questions at this stage? Thank you. Al?
But just a small point here on 10.3.3 on page 181 about cycling. You mentioned it. And just to point out that the My Journey Quiet Link from Finchampstead to Wokingham Town Centre has actually been blocked. At landowners put a fence across it at Blagrove Drive so you can no longer get from Blagrove Drive to Oaklands Park. So it actually ends at the rather busy Barkham Road or Finchampstead Road, whichever way you go. So I don't know if anyone's going to sort that out. Someone can make a note of that and try and reopen that route. But I just wanted to mention 10.2.9, the missing bridleway. I mean, is there any chance of this being reinstated?
At this stage, it's really hard to say. I've checked with our Public Rights of Way team just today, and they have still confirmed that the application is pending. As I mentioned before, the British Horse Society has submitted their definitive map modification order application, and as part of that, they're required to provide evidence, sort of in the form of historic shops and other things they have to support their case. So it's really hard to say without having a sort of specialist here that deals with those applications as to whether the submission is robust enough to pass.
Just on that point, I think it's important to have minuted that the application for a bridle path, reinstatement of the bridle path, is pending. And I think, Connie, you explained that in its present, because of that, its pending status, it doesn't meet the test, would not meet the test for us including reinstatement as a condition. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I think that's also very important to note. Thank you. Al, do you have any further questions?
No, just to say that I did actually cycle to the site visit here at 9 o'clock in the morning and survived, so I'm not quite sure how.
Thank you, Al. Okay, Stuart.
Yes, thank you. I think this evening sounds to me a bit like a numbers game about the number of houses that were in what plan and when and if before the mobile homes. But what on site? One of the only questions I remember asking, which was the housing density proposed at this site, and I was told that it was less than the one beside it, which our members of the public have told us is not the case. Now, please, can you explain to me, is that true or is that not true? It's all numbers tonight.
So officers have carried out their own sort of density calculations, I suppose, without comparing exactly how Hugh has done his calculations. It's quite hard to know for sure what parameters we've both done. But paragraph 4.30 sort of outlines the densities of neighbouring residential developments. So we've got Woodside Close, which we've equated to 24 dwellings per hectare. To the north, Fir Cottage Roads equates to approximately 18 dwellings per hectare. And then to the West Victoria Gardens is 517 dwellings per hectare, because that's a really dense development on a small piece of land. The proposed density at 31 Barkham Ride, so the pending application is presently 17.6 dwellings per hectare, and this site it's 19.3. So they're all roughly around the same ballpark, with the exception of Victoria Gardens, which obviously has a much higher density.
Thank you, Connie. Stuart, do you have a further question? Wayne, you said that you would.
Oh, I am. I give it to you, Brian. It is interesting when I've asked officers for this number, I keep being told that the calculations have been done by various people, some of which have left, and they've used different methodology for calculating. And the last one we had was, as I said, I think it was the 13th of December 2022. So the current number we've got is 3.2, which is about a year old. What I think it would be useful, because this issue isn't going to go away, is we sit here and we approve sites, which is like a funnel. We're putting stuff into the hopper. Hopefully the land supply goes up. So as we keep putting stuff in, that land supply position should, in theory, start going up. Now, we're putting stuff in. Now, I don't know if, unless they're building more than 890 houses across the borough each year, we seem to be in a position where we're putting stuff in, but it's not going up. And I think we need to have sight, because there's a few sites that have been approved by this committee, large numbers. And another one we're coming on to a bit later, although that's already been proved, and I'm hoping that Connor will tell us he can get that into the hopper even quicker. It's so important, this, because this is going to be a contentious issue every time we come here. Now, in this situation, we wouldn't be here if we had a local plan, although the local plan did say 70, and as the gentleman said, the Finchampstead plan did support 70. So as Stuart says, we're back to a numbers. But I do have a lot of sympathy for the people who live on that road, because their looking at something and they must be frustrated. They're looking to the future and thinking, all of this is going to happen around us. Where are we going to push the settlement boundary? And yet all tonight we're talking about is one increased site.
Yeah, I think again, I think that you raise a very, very important point, Wayne, and my suggestion would be that we continue this discussion in a structured way, perhaps with a meeting with officers outside, of this meeting, because as you quite rightly say, this will be a recurring issue, and we need to to have informed discussion about it. So thank you very much, for that suggestion. If there are no further questions at this point, I would like to make one comment and also to ask one question. I noted that the primary reason that is cited in the agenda documents pack for Councillor Marget's listing this application was on the grounds that he considered it to be an unsustainable location, and that view was certainly expressed also by at least one other occasion this evening. My own personal view is that the site visit, combined with the empirical evidence provided on page 180, really do not provide very much support for this viewpoint. I would suggest limited support, at best. Now, there is some extensive reference on pages 196 to 198 on a matter that I also believe has generated a lot of very understandable concern by stakeholders, including residents. And that is concern over the relationship with other developments on Barkham Ride. And I thank officers for including, a fairly meaty section in the report on this matter. There's a note on page 198 on the possibility of a project board to look into wider coordination of developments in the area. And it's also noted that this has been discussed by, amongst others, by the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think that many members of this committee, would support this approach. But my question is, can officers please explain why it would not be permissible, or it may, to include as a condition relating to a project board or similar to help coordinate, manage the number of developments that may or may not eventuate on Barkham Ride.
Thank you, Chair. So the activities of the council wider than the planning function cover many different statutory and obviously non-statutory roles. The executive, the administration have priorities, and they have formats to discuss, issues that they're alert to. And one of them obviously is the cumulative impact of a number of developments, whether they be council developments, whether they be private developments such as this, whether they be infrastructure, whether it be drainage, transport, that cut across a number of different functions. Now, each site obviously has its own impacts and implications, and where possible and where necessary, as Connie has highlighted, the cumulative impacts of development can be considered when they are material. So, for example, if a permission has been granted on this land or next to this land and is extant, and a developer could go on site and put a spade in the ground, then that is a material consideration. There are also considerations we need to bear in mind with possible development that could come forward. There's no guarantee, and as Michael mentioned before, planning permissions change. The economy changes. We don't know what's next week, let alone next year. So in terms of whether all sites will come forward, what order they will come forward, what composition, what nature, that is very fluid. Each application must be considered obviously on its own standalone with its own conditions that support the impacts, that mitigate the impacts of this development. We can't, as it's made clear by government, we can't ask a developer to sort out a problem unrelated to that development. However, if numbers of developments contribute towards a problem, absolutely they can pool mitigation. That's our section 106, contributions, community infrastructure levy, and so on. In this case, activities the council may undertake at a higher level to coordinate with developers would require that overarching role of government, local government, and would not be within the remit or control, nor meet the tests of an individual planning permission. What we can do is require each development to wash its own face: construction management, environmental management, hours of operation, communications plan. Those things, especially things like communications plan, can feed into departments within the council. Alan's department in transport will be responsible for assessing certain aspects related to transport. Likewise, planning will deal with other aspects, waste, ecology, and so on. But that needs to be coordinated at a higher level. And obviously, once we have details, once permissions are in train, then that can be coordinated through the structures at the council and not through the planning permission itself. So hopefully that clarifies what we can and can't do there. Okay, Chair, thanks.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Brian. Do any members have more questions? Any more questions? Okay, Wayne?
I think in simple terms, Brian, if I'm going to say it again, if we had a local plan, we've now got a Finchampstead neighbourhood plan. So in theory, that should be enough. That should be enough to protect this area if one were in place. I know what you're saying about an hierarchy. I know what you're saying, but in theory, if we had a plan, a 5 years supply, etc., then we wouldn't be in a predicament to look at the cumulative effect of developments within Barkham Ride Road. Sorry.
A brief response from anyone? So I do feel this has been covered before.
Yeah, so this was touched upon in paragraph 3.24 of the main report, and that paragraph discusses the situation where the tilted balance is engaged, but there is an up-to-date neighbourhood plan, and that's covered then by paragraph 14 of the NPPF. So I'll just read it out. So it says, in situations where the presumption at paragraph 11D applies to applications involving the provision of housing, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, providing both the following apply. So A, the neighbourhood plan became a part of the development plan within 5 years or less before the date on which the decision is made, which is the case here because the Finchampstead neighbourhood plan was adopted just last year. But then it goes on to say B, the neighbourhood plan contains policies and allocations to meet its identified housing requirement. And then paragraph 3.25 of the report then goes on to say how, although subsection A is complied with, B is not, because the Finchampstead neighbourhood plan does not contain any housing allocation sites. If it did, then things would change and the neighbourhood plan would then have greater weight in this situation. So it's just unfortunate that the neighbourhood plan doesn't comply with both A and B, because as you said, we would then be able to assess it differently.
Thank you, Connie. Okay, if there are no more further questions from members, I'd like to draw the members' attention to the officer recommendation as outlined on pages 149 and 150, plus the update regarding section 106 agreement as stated on pages 5 and 6 in the members' update. Is there a member who would like to make a proposal? Sorry, Al, your proposal?
I propose that we accept the officer's recommendations.
Okay, seconded. Tony? Okay, all those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation? Thank you. Okay, against? Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. I've been advised by Democratic Services that I, as chair, have casting vote, and so I support this application, the approval of this application. Right. Thank you, members of the audience. We still do have other applications to consider this evening, so unless you would like to remain to listen to those, could you please quietly leave the room? Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you please to leave the room quickly and quietly, as we have not concluded our business for this evening.
Did I miss anything? Right, ladies and gentlemen, let us crack on to the final two, as the final package application, which is agenda item 78, which is combining application numbers 190914, 191068, 192325. Now it's listed in the agenda as being for information only, which it was, but the supplementary agenda is saying actually we do now need to actually just take a formal decision on this for reasons that I think Emmy will explain. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report to the committee is to provide an update on the delivery of the South Wokingham strategic development location, and specifically on some of the changes to how the supporting infrastructure is to be secured. Just to start with a little bit of background, the core strategy, which was adopted in 2010, established the vision for sustainable development in the borough in the period up to 2026, including over 13,000 new homes, the majority of which were to be concentrated in 4 strategic development locations. And of those, 2,500 are to be in an urban extension to the south of Wokingham. And the reason for this approach was to allow for comprehensive planning and delivery of high quality development, critically including the supporting infrastructure that's necessary for that. In the case of South Wokingham, one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure is the South Wokingham Distributor Road, which will be a continuous new route running through the SDL, connecting the A329 London Road in the north to the 321 Finch-Hampstead Road in the south, just near Tesco's. In terms of what's happening on the strategic development location, it's divided roughly by the Reading to Waterloo railway line, and the first phase, which was 636 dwellings on land north of the railway at Montague Park, is now complete, and that's outlined in yellow on the plan before you. It represents roughly a quarter of the development in the SDL and delivered its proportionate share of the necessary infrastructure, including the first section of the Distributor Road from the London Road down to the railway, which is now known as William Heeler's Way, and you can see the red arrow on the drawing. The second section of the Distributor Road, which is commonly referred to as the Eastern Gateway, was approved in February 2018 and opened in early 2022. And it includes a bridge over the railway line extending William Heeler's Way to a new roundabout on Waterloo Road. An application for the third central section of the Distributor Road from Waterloo Road to Finch-Hampstead Road was approved on 24th of May 2021. There's no updates in relation to that element of the SDL. Work is actually due to start on the road imminently. We're sort of dealing with conditions for that. Once constructed, it will provide access to the new development, form a corridor for sustainable travel, and offer an alternative route and thereby some traffic relief through the historic town centre of Wokingham. So that will result in reduced traffic congestion, improved air quality, and also create opportunities for further public realm improvements in the town centre. In terms of the housing development in the SDL, there were 4 applications submitted during 2019 which complete the comprehensively planned proposals for the SDL. There are a suite of 3 applications referred to as Phase 2, which you can see dotted in blue on the plan, and then an fourth application for Phase 3, which was reported to committee in 2021. So there are resolutions to approve all of those applications subject to 106, and together they would deliver up 1,820 new homes, of which 637 would be affordable, together with the supporting infrastructure. And as I say, the resolutions were to approve subject to legal agreements to secure the infrastructure, including particular relevance to this update, the land for the Distributor Road, and among other things, the primary school, community facility, and public open space, including allotments. So since the committee resolutions in 2021 and 2, we've been working with the developers to progress the Section 106 agreements. I think the broad requirements were set out in the core strategy, the Infrastructure Delivery and Contributions SPD, and the now historic Regulation 123 list, which also established an expectation that SDL applications would be accompanied by an infrastructure delivery plan. And the infrastructure delivery plan for South Wokingham is being prepared jointly by the 5 applicants, which include the council in its capacity as the developer for the Southern Distributor Road. It sets out the comprehensive package of infrastructure to support development in the strategic development location, how the infrastructure is to be secured and delivered. So that's generally either conditions, an obligation for the developer to deliver the works, or a financial contribution to allow the council to carry out works. And then also the proportionate share for each party of the contributions. And that then informs the Section 106 agreements. So the committee reports, when the applications were first reported to committee, set out heads of terms for the legal agreements. And then through the subsequent IDP negotiations, there have been detailed discussions about the costs and how they'll be fairly apportioned. Inevitably, it's been a long and complex process. For a few reasons, it's been necessary to agree very robust costs for the infrastructure because of the way the apportionment's happening, and that's particularly critical for the council and costs associated with the road, just in order to reduce the risk to the council. And also just the number of parties involved. You've got 5 applications, 5 different developers and numerous landowners as well who all need to be in agreement. So the key change emerging from the negotiations, and which is the reason we really need to bring this back to committee, relates to who's responsible for construction of the primary school community facility and allotments. Originally, the developers were going to provide the land and the council was going to deliver those facilities funded through SIL. However, due to escalating costs generally, just to global situations, the pandemic, Ukraine, cost of living, all these things, the cost of the road has increased significantly compared to original forecasts, and we're now looking at something over 56 million for the road as a whole. And there are many competing demands, as you'll be well aware, on the council's budgets as well. So to help meet the increased cost, it's been agreed that the developers will now deliver the school, the community facility and the allotments. So for that's works they will be delivering, the council would have had to fund through SIL, and a saving of probably around £20 million for the council. Associated with that change, there are changes to the triggers for delivery of those facilities to make sure that they're ready when they're needed. And so this report is effectively updating the heads of terms to secure the land and the delivery, and the 106s would now also set out the specification for the facilities to ensure that they're built to an appropriate standard. And I think just to be aware, if this isn't agreed, the original resolution would still stand, so the council would remain liable for the costs of the school community facility and allotments. I think it's a slight aside to the sort of purpose of this report, but it's obviously important that the distributor road is open early in the development. And although it's not directly relevant to this decision, the council's been pursuing other funding streams to help with the delivery of the road, and has been offered a fully recoverable interest-free loan from Homes England to bridge the gap between SIL income when the housing starts to be delivered and needing to deliver the road earlier on, which the alternative would be something like taking a loan with interest or delaying the road and therefore having an impact on the network. So that's also a great positive. Another change, which I think the original recommendations allowed the assistant director to make amendments to conditions arising from the post-committee discussions. And I think the key change there is where at the time of committee, the package of infrastructure was known, but not who would be delivering what, and that's been refined a lot more now. So some of the conditions listed all, I think particularly we're looking at the off-site highway and pedestrian cycle works, and they listed all the necessary works in each decision, whereas now we can narrow them down to be specific to what each developer is doing, and that's set out in more detail in the committee report. Also, an update to the SAN condition for the largest phase to allow for the likely phasing of that. And there are some other, updates, like, for example, the tariffs for My Journey and SAM contributions have changed since the earlier resolutions. And just to note that all contributions are index linked in any case. So then moving on to the resolution, as Chairman's already mentioned, there is a change to the recommendation from the originally published report in the update that went out, because we had legal advice that to make sure that we were robust and not open to challenge, the committee should vote on it, even though I think essentially the infrastructure being delivered is unchanged. It's just a benefit to the council that there's £20 million that we would have needed to meet from SIL that wouldn't now. So the recommendation, which applies to all 3 of the applications, is to agree the revised mechanism for delivery of the school community facility and allotments, So the developers would be providing the land and constructing the infrastructure. As I mentioned, if it's not agreed, the original resolution still stands. And then it also reiterates the authorisation for the Assistant Director to update conditions, and that the applications could be refused if the 106 agreements are not signed. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much for that. I mean, my reading of this and listening to what you said, this is a bit of belts and braces exercise to actually just make sure we remove any possibility of a challenge that slows the thing up. I've done quite extensive reading you sent in the supplementary letters. Thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions or challenges on this? So I've got Wayne, Tony, and Michelle.
Just so that I'm clear, so we were going to deliver the school, etc., ourselves. We were going to deliver it.
Yeah. Yes.
Now they're going to deliver it.
Yes.
So the cost of living crisis can't be that bad. And this goes to the hub of what I was saying at the last application. And I have all the sympathy for you two, because I know what journey you've been on this nightmare. But had we had those numbers, we wouldn't be in the issue that we come up against at every planning committee, because you've got over 2 years here worth of land supply, you know. And so, I mean, all I would say is whatever we can do to get them to get on with this, so that we've got a plan so we can put it into the hopper, it needs to be done, because they've said all this before and they've not delivered. So I just hope they do this time.
Yeah, just in response to that, we've obviously very closely working with the developers and everybody involved in this. They are looking, subject to an approval, they are looking to get on site in about 6 months' time to be building houses next year. So that could be factored into the local plan, the housing land supply numbers. Clearly, what an inspector will need to see is evidence that that's happening, because we can't just say it's going to happen. But we're working up reserve matters with them, we're working up conditions with them. So that's a lot of cost to the developers. So they're very serious about getting going on this site. The delay essentially in the recent times has been our conflict with the road and the cost, because things have gone up massively, clearly. So yeah, essentially the scheme before you is really a better deal for the taxpayers.
Road is so essential because it's doing development in the right way, not what we've just experienced. Piecemeal stuff on Barkham Ride.
Yeah, I think you agree.
Not right, but
yeah, I mean, some of the council's biggest successes is the ability to forward fund infrastructure. We've done that the whole way, and that's what the Homes England loan secures for us. It's the ability to plug that gap in the funding from SIL to forward fund the road, and also by delivering in one go, it's £56 million. Pretty expensive. You do it in lumps, you're talking 70-80 million pound. So it's again a tax saving to the local residents. Sorry?
Yeah, it's sort of on a very simplistic level here. We've had a renegotiation with the developers, which they're going to pay 20 million that we were going to have to pay. There must be some payback on that. I having dealt with builders in the past, you don't get anything out of them for nothing. I just wonder how that negotiation went, what we've given up.
I think, well, I mean, that's what it would probably have cost the council if they were building it. We won't have the figures of what it actually costs them to implement it. But I think the thing is that they are very much dependent on delivery of the road as well. They can't get in and access a lot. I mean, they could make a start, but the development can't be completed. You can't build out fully without the road. So it's a sort of, you know, a symbiotic relationship. We need the housing land delivery and they need the road to be able to build the houses. So that's really their interest in it.
Thank you.
Two things. One, on your thing that's up there, please put a comma after school and then community facility. So the school, it's not the school community facility, it's the school, comma, community facility. Yeah, two separate things. And make sure the community facility is actually fitted out, unlike Montague Park, and put nowhere near the school, so actually it can be used at other times. That's the problem with most of the community facilities we've had. They either are next to a school, so then we can't use it during the day, the borough can't use it, or the residents can't use it because of child endangerment. But also to make sure that the facility actually is usable. Montague Park is absolutely worthless as it is right now because it's an empty shell and no one's got £250,000 to fit it out to run it.
Just on that point, so the Montague Park, there is a room there. It isn't being used, but it was never intended as part. If you look at the development plan for South Woking, there was never a community facility intended there. What happened was the developers, David Wilson, because they came ahead of everybody else by quite a long way, essentially offered that up as a assistance to get them planning permission, because it's something. The new centre would be, so there's a school which is separate to the community building. So where we did it in the past, we built them together. It was a cost saving exercise. Clearly there's issues with that. We've learned our lesson and it's two separate buildings.
It's just sure we've learned the lesson because it was a real disaster. I mean, no one can find anybody who wants to run the community center because it's an empty storefront and they have to even fit out the plumbing and the electricity and everything like that. And so it's a great place, but it's useless.
Okay. I mean, I kind of echo Wayne's sentiments entirely. Should heaven's sake crack on with this because we need these houses and we need them soon.
Yeah.
Has anybody else got any further comments or questions about it? No. In that case, actually, I'm going to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and pass this across. Rochelle seconding. Yeah, those in favour? That's great. Thank you. Crack on and give us the houses. Yeah. That was the last item on the agenda, which brings the meeting to an end. Thank you all for your time and patience, and see you all next month.